This video is part of the You Protagonist series. Here, you don't just listen to a story, you live every detail and emotion of it. Scene by scene, decision by decision, you are the protagonist. And so that you can see yourself in every moment, the protagonist's face doesn't appear, and neither her name nor her physical traits are ever mentioned. So take a deep breath, close your eyes if you want, and get ready to feel everything like it's real. But before diving into your story, hit that subscribe button, because today, the emotion is going to hit you deep. The kettle was whistling in the kitchen, but you didn't move an inch. You just sat there on the worn-out couch, a thin blanket draped over your shoulders, eyes fixed on the cracks in the ceiling. Life had faded over the past few months. You counted your coins before going to the store, held back tears so your mom wouldn't worry over the phone, and faked optimism every time someone asked how you were doing. You were surviving. That's it. The walls of that tiny apartment felt like they were shrinking more each day. The silence, once comforting, now felt suffocating. Social media only showed you lives that didn't even seem real. Women smiling on trips, celebrating wins, living routines that looked like they belonged in another galaxy. You didn't want luxury. You just wanted peace, stability, a place where you could breathe without worrying about the next bill. But nothing seemed to fall into place. That morning, you opened your email almost on autopilot. You weren't expecting anything new, but there it was. We need a full-time nanny for a 6-year-old child. Live-in, above average salary. You read the ad again, trying to spot the catch. The address was in one of the city's most luxurious neighborhoods. The signature at the bottom was simple, but one quick search was enough to tell you exactly who you were dealing with. Dr. Adrian Ferraz, renowned surgeon, medical director at one of the country's most prestigious hospitals. A name that popped up often in magazines and society columns, always with a stone-cold expression, always alone, always intriguing. You hesitated. But desperate times don't wait. And deep down, a little voice whispered that maybe this wasn't a coincidence. Maybe this was destiny knocking. You replied to the email, straight to the point, no fluff, just honest. You talked about your experience with kids, the love you had for them, and your willingness to move wherever was needed. Hours later, a reply came in. Interview tomorrow, 9 a.m., be punctual, side gate. Your heart raced. You tried not to get your hopes up, but a tiny spark of hope lit up inside. It was just a job, but it was also a chance to start over. That night, you barely slept. You spent hours staring at your closet, picking the most neutral, decent-looking outfit you had. You put on a soft shade of lipstick, tied your hair carefully, and when you looked in the mirror, you didn't just see someone desperate for a job. You saw a woman who, despite everything, still believed she could rewrite her story. As you left the house, the wind was sharp, almost like it knew where your weak spots were. You wrapped your arms around yourself, trying to shield from the world. But something felt different that morning. A gut feeling. A scent of change in the air. You didn't know it yet, but you were about to walk through the doors of a house where nothing would be ordinary, and where the gaze of a man hardened by life would find in you the spark he didn't even know was still alive. The side gate was tall, made of dark iron, and intimidating. You pressed the intercom with slightly trembling hands. On the other end, a man's voice answered, curt and to the point. Come in, main door to the left. You walked across the perfectly manicured garden, the sound of your footsteps muffled by white stone. Everything around you screamed precision. Every detail on the facade, every perfectly placed flower, as if the homeowner didn't tolerate a single mistake. When the door opened, a middle-aged woman greeted you. Her hair pulled back to perfection, her expression strict. Follow me. The doctor's already waiting. You just nodded, swallowing your nerves. You walked down a hallway decorated with modern paintings and neutral tones. No family photos, no sign of emotional life on the walls. Just silence, and a coldness that seemed to seep straight from the marble under your feet. The office door was slightly ajar, and the moment you stepped inside, the world paused for just a second. He was standing with his back to you, staring out of the giant glass window. A phone sat on the desk, next to an expensive-looking watch and a glass half full of water. "Miss." His voice was deep, precise, with a soft accent you couldn't quite place. "Have a seat." You sat down. The words got stuck in your throat, choked by the weight of his presence. And when he finally turned around, the impact hit you harder than you expected. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair neatly styled. His eyes, cold, intense, impossible to read. But there was something beyond the good looks, an air of complete control, like he was used to owning any room he walked into, including this one. "Why do you want this job?" he asked, straight to the point. You talked about your experience, your need, your love for children. Tried to keep your composure. But the way he looked at you made you feel stripped of all defenses. At one point, he cut you off. "Do you know who I am?" You hesitated, then answered, "I know you're a renowned surgeon, and that you have a son." That's enough. Silence settled between you two. Intense. Almost painful. He stepped closer, leaning against the side of the desk, arms crossed. His eyes scanned you like they were searching for cracks. "Most candidates come in here trying to impress me. You seem real. That's dangerous." You didn't get it. Or maybe you got it too well. "Dangerous for who?" you dared to ask. He smiled for the first time, a brief smile. Almost sad. "For me." Before you could say anything, the door suddenly swung open. The woman who had greeted you earlier was now accompanied by another. Elegant, flawless makeup, high heels. She walked in like she owned the place. "Adrian, can we talk? Alone?" Her voice was sweet on the surface but sharp underneath. He didn't take his eyes off you. "I'm in an interview. Wait." The woman shot you a look that said it all. You weren't welcome here. "She's not right for this place, Adrian. You know that." "I haven't decided who will care for my son yet," he replied coldly. You stood up. The air was way too heavy. "I can wait outside." But before you could leave, he said, without raising his voice, "Stay. The decision's mine." And right then, in that very moment, you realized there was a lot more at stake here than just a job. The woman stormed out like someone who didn't accept no for an answer. Her heels clicked sharply down the hallway, marking her exit with the same arrogance she'd entered with. You stayed there, still standing, not fully understanding what had just happened. This wasn't just an interview. It felt like a minefield. He walked toward the door slowly, closing it with surgical precision. "Sorry about the interruption," he said, emotionless, but with a trace of exhaustion in his voice. You sat down again, trying to calm your nerves. "Who is she?" you asked, almost without thinking. He hesitated. "Just someone who still thinks she has the right to weigh in on my life." A loaded silence followed. He sat on the other side of the desk but didn't go back to the professional tone of the interview. He just watched you, like he was trying to figure out who you were, why you stirred something in him so quietly, so unexpectedly. "You don't seem nervous about all this," he said. "I am. I'm just hiding it well." That answer made the corner of his mouth curve into a near smile, and for the first time you felt the ice begin to melt, slowly, like snow touched by the noon sun. After a few more formal questions, he wrapped up by saying the boy was upstairs, but if you were chosen, there'd be plenty of time to get to know him gradually. "He doesn't trust people easily," he said, looking out the window. "But he doesn't smile for just anyone either. If he smiles at you, it's because he likes you." You walked out of that room with your heart tight in your chest. You could feel it. Something was about to begin. Or maybe everything was about to fall apart even more. 2 days later, the email arrived. "You've been selected. Move in immediately. Room to the right of the main hallway." You showed up for your first day of work with just a small suitcase and a backpack. The house was quiet, like no one there even dared to breathe loudly. The boy, Lucas, was sweet, but very shy. He spent most of his time in his room, drawing. You respected that. You took your time, approaching slowly, and he watched you closely, like he was waiting for you to disappear. Days went by. His father barely showed up. He'd leave early, come back late. But every time he passed by you, there was always this frozen second where your eyes met. And in that look, there was a strange tension. It wasn't blatant desire or casual kindness. It was a kind of inner conflict. Like he was fighting something. Like you were a risk he didn't want to take, but couldn't quite stay away from either. One night, you were in the kitchen making tea when he walked in. No lab coat. Just a hoodie. Barefoot. His hair slightly messy. He looked less like a doctor and more like a man. "You don't have to do that," he said, seeing you heating the water. "I like it. It calms me down." "You have that effect," he said, almost in a whisper. You turned your face, not sure what to make of it. You didn't know if that was a compliment, a trap, or just something he needed to let out. "Why did you really go for this job?" he asked, like he was testing your true motives. "Because I need to start over. And for some reason this place feels like a good place to begin." He didn't reply. But in that moment, he stepped closer. Took the cup from your hand. Your fingers touched. For a second, time stopped. You felt the warmth of his skin, the subtle scent of his cologne, the weight of the silence hanging between you. Then he said, "Unfortunately, some new beginnings can come at a high cost." You tried to stick to the routine in the house. Breakfast for Lucas, drawings on the living room rug, little victories like a shy smile or a curious question about the outside world. Little by little, he started to open up to you, and you felt like everything was finally falling into place. But his father remained a mystery. Some days he was kind, almost sweet in small gestures. Other days he barely said good morning. It confused you. And more than that, it hurt. You didn't want to care, but those mood swings got to you. Then, on a cloudy afternoon, Lucas asked, with a child's simple honesty, "Are you going to leave like the others?" That question cut deep. "I don't know. Do you want me to leave?" "No. But my dad always sends people away when he starts liking them." You froze. "He told you that?" "No, but I see it. He gets weird, sad, then people go away." That night, you decided not to sleep early. You wanted to figure out who this man really was, the one who made you feel both scared and fascinated all at once. That's when you heard muffled voices downstairs. You went down in silence, stepping lightly like someone chasing the truth. The office door was slightly ajar. Inside, he was talking to the woman you'd seen during the interview. Her voice was sharp, irritated. "What did you see in that new nanny? She's not right for Lucas." "You're overreacting," he replied flatly. "You've been different since she showed up. Less cold, less you. That's not a good thing." "For who?" "For me, and for you too. You're gonna end up getting both of you hurt." You stepped back, your heart racing. She wasn't just a former co-worker. She was someone who knew his cracks, and wasn't okay with being replaced. Hours later, you were still staring at the ceiling in your room, your head spinning. What was between them? Why did he let her speak to him like that? The next morning, you went downstairs for breakfast and found him already at the table, holding a newspaper, looking a little worn. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Not really. I'm sorry, but I ended up hearing your conversation last night. With that woman," you said straight up, worried about your job. He slowly lowered the newspaper. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "It wasn't on purpose, but I did. And I have to say, I don't get why she doesn't like me or why she talks to you that way." His eyes narrowed, like you'd touched an old wound. "She knows parts of me that you might not want to see." You felt the weight of those words, but something inside you refused to back off. "Then show me. I'm taking care of your son, And knowing the father helps me understand how to deal with him." He suddenly stood up, walked over slowly, until he was right in front of you. "It's important you know right now that I want what's best for him, and I'm not your enemy." He raised his hand, and for a second, you thought he was going to touch you. But he stopped midair, like he was still trying to hold himself back. "You're the first living thing to walk into this house in years, and that scares me, more than any surgery I've ever done." You didn't answer, because in that broken confession, he'd shown a side no one else had ever seen. The man behind the scalpel. The following days felt suspended in the air. You kept doing your job with dedication, but now you could feel his gaze on you, more alert, more intense, with every move you made. Lucas noticed it too. One day, as he saw you chatting with his father in the kitchen, the boy came over, took your hand, and said softly, "You're making him different. That's good. But he's gonna run. He always runs." You knelt down in front of Lucas, eyes welling up. "I don't want him to run. Not from me, and not from you." The boy smiled shyly. And in that moment, a wave of belonging flooded your chest. For the first time in a long time, you didn't want to leave. That very night, a storm fell over the city. Lightning split the sky like exposed nerves, and the house felt even quieter, like it was listening with you to every rumble of thunder. You were in the living room reading a book when the lights flickered and went out for good. Darkness wrapped around you like a cloak. Your heart started racing, not because of the dark, but because it felt like something was about to happen. Suddenly, footsteps. Steady, confident. He walked into the room with a flashlight, the golden beam cutting through the gloom. "Are you okay?" he asked. You nodded, but your breath was shaky. He stepped closer and held out his hand. "Come. The generator takes a while to kick in. You can wait in my office, or wherever you prefer." You couldn't explain the impulse, but you responded, "Can I wait in your room?" The question hung in the air, bold, raw, honest. He hesitated, then nodded silently. You walked up the stairs side by side, and every inch between you felt electrified. His room was sober, masculine, dressed in dark tones and the scent of wood and something else. Something unmistakably him. "Sit down. The power'll be back soon," he said, motioning to the armchair near the window. You did as he said. The rain pounded against the glass, and for a while, the two of you just listened. It felt like the world outside was washing something away inside you both. "You know," he said, "you've brought a lot of life and light into this house, and that makes me happy. I feel happy here too, with both of you." Then you stood up, walked over to him, and touched his face, feeling the soft stubble beneath your fingertips. "I really feel happy here." He closed his eyes for a moment. And when he opened them, everything exploded. The kiss came heavy with silence, filled with longing for something neither of you had even lived yet. Your bodies found each other like they already knew. His hands moved along your waist with care, like he was afraid to break something fragile, and you pulled him closer, with no guilt, no fear. For the first time in ages, you felt truly wanted and seen. But then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, more insistently. He pulled away, reluctantly, eyes still locked on yours. "It's the hospital," he said, tension creeping into his voice. He stepped back slowly, like someone leaving a place they desperately wanted to stay. He answered the call right there, turning his back to you. The conversation was short, but his whole body stiffened. He hung up and turned around, face harder now. "The managing partner is on her way over. They said it's urgent." You stood slowly, saying nothing. The mood had shifted. But what hurt wasn't the interruption. It was the fact that he, once again, put his armor back on. That coldness, like a shield. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. He opened the door, and she walked in without waiting for an invitation. Her stiletto heels echoed against the hardwood like every step was a verdict. She spotted you at the top of the stairs. Her eyes went straight to you, sharp, cutting. Then she turned to him. "We need to talk. Alone." "Now's not a good time," he replied firmly. "It's going to get worse if you don't hear me out. Things are happening at the hospital, and people are watching your personal life a little too closely." She threw a subtle glance in your direction, like someone already planning their next move. You stayed there, silent. But inside you, something had started to churn. For the first time, you didn't know if you were just a woman in a temporary job, or the center of a growing threat spinning out of control. The woman left after a tense conversation in the office. You didn't hear it all, but caught scattered phrases, veiled accusations, warnings disguised as advice, and your name being mentioned as a bad influence. When he came out of the room, his expression was dark. "She said the hospital's watching your personal life? Why would they care about that?" you asked. He let out a deep breath, running his hand through his hair. "The hospital doesn't care about my personal life, but she does, and she's using that as an excuse for what's really going on." "And what is going on?" "She wants my seat on the board, always has. Now she's trying to make it look like my personal life affects my professional ethics." You took a few seconds to absorb that. "Because of me?" He nodded. "She knows the board. She knows how to plant doubt. Says that my relationship with an employee could be seen as favoritism or emotional instability. But it's all manipulation. She doesn't care about protecting the hospital's image. She wants to ruin mine." He looked at you with a mix of guilt and tenderness. "I should keep my distance. Protect you from all of this." "And you think the way to do that is by pushing me away?" you asked, steady, meeting his eyes. The silence between you was thick, but there was no more room for pretending. The next morning, Lucas woke up with a fever. You cared for him like he was your own. Even sick, he reached his little arms out to you, looking for comfort. "Don't leave, okay?" he whispered, teary-eyed. You promised, even though you didn't know how you'd keep that promise. Later, while Lucas napped, you went down to the kitchen. You found Adrian there, alone, making tea with automatic, precise movements, like he was trying to escape his own thoughts. "I don't know how to be a father," he said softly, "but you know how to feel. That's more than most people ever manage." He turned around, and there was something new in his eyes. Vulnerability. "She said you'll destroy my career, but I think you might be the only thing that can save me." You stepped closer, stopped right in front of him. "Then stop pushing me away." He touched your face with the tips of his fingers, a gesture so gentle it barely felt real. "Being near you makes me forget where I came from, the deals I made, the things I've lost. But when you smile, everything feels bearable." You didn't say anything. You just pulled him into you. The kiss came like a reunion long overdue. This time, he didn't pull back. He took your hand, led you to the bedroom, closed the door slowly, and in that moment, there were no masks, no justifications. The touches were slow at first, like each one asked for permission, then urgent. Breaths quickened, eyes burned, his skin against yours. It wasn't just desire, it was need, for both of you. It was escape and surrender, all at once. And when silence finally returned to the room, he held you close to his chest and whispered, "I don't want you to leave this place." Adrian had to leave for a meeting. He said it would be quick. You spent the afternoon with Lucas, who now slept peacefully after the fever. His forehead was cool, his breathing calm. You gently adjusted his blanket, feeling a real affection growing for that little boy. What connected you two wasn't just your job anymore. It was something you couldn't quite name, but felt deeply in your chest, a sense of belonging, and a fear of losing everything. That's when the sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, breaking the silence. You hesitated to get up, but the housekeeper had already left, and there was no one else. You checked to make sure Lucas was still sleeping soundly, then slowly went downstairs, your heart tightening with a strange intuition. When you peeked through the peephole, you knew your gut was right. It was Miranda, impeccable as always. Her very presence felt like an invasion. You opened the door. Alone? How interesting, she said with that sweet, poison-laced tone. What do you want? Lucas is resting. If you've got something to say, make it quick, please. Already acting like you own the place? You're quite the dangerous one, aren't you? Watch your words, Miranda. Oh, sweetheart, the one who needs to be careful here is you. After all, it's your job that's on the line. She left with that air of superiority, and you were shaken by the direct threat she'd made. That night, you barely slept. Even with Adrian beside you, the room cloaked in silence and his breath warming the back of your neck. Something inside you stayed restless. In the morning, he woke before you did. He left a cup of coffee on the nightstand and a handwritten note. Back before lunch. Just a meeting with the board. Don't worry. I'm in control. A. You held onto that note longer than you probably should have. You remembered his touch, the way he whispered things when he thought you were asleep. But now, everything felt a little more fragile. You went to Lucas's room to wake him. It was already late, and asked how he'd slept. I slept well. I dreamed we were a family, he said, with that childlike simplicity only a kid could have. And in that moment, you realized your commitment there was no longer just about a paycheck. It was about two hearts, his and his father's. When Adrian came back, his expression was harder. He found you in the house library with a book open, but your mind was far away. What happened? You asked when you saw him pause at the doorway. The meeting was strange. What do you mean? They got an anonymous email. Accusations about me. Miranda? Most likely. She's testing the waters. Trying to see if I'll crack. And are you? You asked, your throat tight. He walked over to you, sat down in front of you. I'm more vulnerable than I'd like to admit, but not regretful. You know the difference? You nodded. He took your hand and placed it over his chest. It's beating harder for you. That's a good thing, but also dangerous. And I know you're scared. I am too. You held each other. It was a hug longer than any kiss, a refuge, a silent plea not to give up. And for the first time, you were afraid, because now you knew. You couldn't leave, not even if you tried. The following days passed like a restless whisper. Adrian seemed more present, more open, more yours, but at the same time, more troubled. Not about you, but about something he didn't say. Like he was trying to shield you from a cliff that didn't yet have a name. You saw it in the little things, when he clenched his jaw reading emails, when he ignored calls during dinner, or when he'd leave at night saying he had to deal with something at the hospital. One evening, you were waiting for him out on the porch. The cold wind brushed your skin like a warning. When he arrived, his eyes were shadowed. She won't stop, he said, before even saying good evening. What did she do now? Miranda's trying to drag my name into an old case, a complaint filed by a patient years ago that got dismissed for lack of evidence. Is it serious? Back then, she defended me. Now, she's ready to use it against me, reopen the story, twist it, tear me apart. You stepped closer, took his hands in yours. What are you going to do? Fight. He paused, looked away. There's something you need to know. Tell me. When that complaint was filed, Miranda and I were involved. Not officially, but she knew everything. She stood by me because she thought it'd keep us together. Did you have something with the patient? You asked, your voice steady, even as your chest waged war. No, he said, meeting your eyes. But she fell for me. And when she realized I wouldn't feel the same, she tried to hurt me another way. It was painful. Back then, Miranda helped me. But now, she's using it all as ammunition. You stepped back. You needed air. The ground beneath you felt suddenly unstable. So she's willing to destroy you just because she can't stand seeing you with me. Yes. Because for the first time, I'm someone different beside her. And that's driving her insane. You looked up at the sky, searching for strength. What do you need from me, Adrian? For you to stay, not as a nanny, not as a hostage to all this, but as someone who believes in me. The next morning, while Adrian left to try and calm the storm at the hospital, you received an anonymous message, an unknown number, a photo. It was you, in the hallway of the house, kissing Adrian. Another message. If you keep going, this image will be sent to the board, the press, and the ethics committee. Your stomach turned. There was no doubt now. Someone was watching you. Someone inside, maybe one of the staff, was feeding Miranda with evidence. You didn't want to tell him, but you also knew hiding it could be dangerous for him. That same night, Adrian came home later than usual, exhausted, eyes red. I lost the support of one of the board members. The pressure's growing. Miranda's playing dirty, and I don't know how much longer I can hold it together. You didn't say a word. You just walked to the shelf, picked up your phone, and showed him the photo. She's gone too far. He took the phone. Silence. And now? You asked. Now there's only one way out. But I need you to trust me. You nodded. Because even with fear, even with doubts, with your heart burning, you knew it was too late to turn back. The next morning, Adrian put on his dark suit with the steadiness of a man going into battle. But this time, his eyes held something different. Not just tension. Purpose. Are you sure about what you're going to do? You asked, watching him adjust his tie in front of the mirror. I am. It's time to stop playing defense, he said, turning to you. Are you going to give up the position? If I have to, yes, but not without a fight. I have a meeting with the board today, and then a press conference. Press conference? The media already smells blood. I'd rather be the one to tell my story before someone twists it beyond recognition. You felt your stomach sink. His decision was bold. But the light in his eyes showed that for the first time, Adrian was ready to be transparent, vulnerable, and real. Before leaving, he came over and held your face in his hands. No matter what happens, you changed everything. I'm not trying to save my career out of ego. I'm trying to save my name for you. For us. You didn't know what to say, so you kissed him. A calm kiss. A grown-up kiss. The kind of kiss you give when you know it might be the last one like that. As he walked out, you stayed on the porch, feeling the cold wind on your face. And inside you, the feeling grew, like a thunderstorm about to break. Hours later, the press conference was streamed online. You watched it with Lucas in your lap, the boy silent and wide-eyed, glued to the screen. Adrian stood before the cameras, steady and composed. He thanked the medical team, spoke about his journey at the hospital, and then took a deep breath. I'm facing a clear attempt to destroy my reputation. Baseless accusations, built on distorted interpretations of my personal life. Yes, I'm in a relationship with an employee of my household. A woman who's honest, ethical, and who loves and cares for my son as if he were her own. If that disqualifies me as a doctor, then maybe the problem isn't with my ethics, but with our definition of ethics. Your eyes burned. He continued, revealing that he would temporarily step down as clinical director to allow the old case to be reinvestigated with full transparency, but not from his profession, and not from his truth. Lucas turned to you and whispered. He defended you, in front of everyone. He chose me, you replied, your voice cracking. The next day, you woke up to a silent house. Lucas was still asleep, and Adrian hadn't come back. You tried not to panic. But then your phone rang. Unknown number. You answered with your heart in your throat. This is the hospital front desk. Dr. Adrian asked you to come meet him. He's in the administrative wing. Said you'd know what that means. You got dressed quickly and left Lucas in the care of the backup nanny. something Adrian had arranged days earlier just in case. When you arrived, the hospital felt different. Stares, whispers, but you didn't hesitate. You took the elevator to the top floor, the executive level. When you walked in, he was there, alone, standing by the window. "I knew you'd come," he said, smiling. "You called me, and I told you I'd stay until the end." And right there, in that moment, you knew. The love you two were building wasn't the kind you hide. It was the kind that stands firm, even under a spotlight. You stayed there with him, high up in the glass tower of the hospital, looking down at the world like everything had shrunk. The city kept rushing by outside, but inside that room, time stood still. Adrian pulled you by the waist and hugged you, like he was saying sorry for everything, even for things that hadn't happened yet. "I thought I could get through all of this alone, but now I know. I don't want to fight without you by my side." You wrapped your arms around him and closed your eyes, feeling his chest move slowly against yours. The hours that followed were intense. The hospital had become a silent battleground. Some doctors looked at you with respect, others with judgment, but no one dared say anything out loud. That night, back home, Lucas ran up to you both holding a drawing in his hands. "Look, it's us, me, you, and Daddy." The paper was messy, smudged, full of color. In the middle, a little house with hearts on the roof. You knelt down and hugged him tightly. "Can I keep this forever?" "Only if you promise to stay forever too." Adrian watched the moment unfold, his eyes filled with something you'd never seen in him before. Peace. But the calm didn't last long. 2 days later, Miranda showed up at the hospital with 2 journalists and a lawyer. She demanded that the hospital speed up the investigation, claimed there were new elements. Photos, documents, and, according to her, a recording that would permanently destroy Adrian's professional reputation. You heard about it from a nurse who caught you in the hallway, clearly distressed. Your body froze. Your throat went dry. Later that day, back at home, Adrian confirmed it. "She recorded a conversation between us, edited the audio. It'll sound like I confessed to something I never did." "And the hospital's going to fall for that?" "The ethics committee has to listen. They don't have a choice." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know anymore. I'm tired. For the first time, I feel like I don't have any strength left." You sat beside him on the couch, took his hands, cold, tense. Days passed, some good, others heavy with the weight of the investigation. But you both stayed, together, ready to face whatever came next. On the big day, the final board meeting, you went with him to the hospital, waited anxiously outside the boardroom for the verdict. A forensic expert had detected the audio manipulation, and the rest of the so-called evidence didn't hold up. Finally, Adrian was cleared. When he stepped out of that room, he pulled you into his arms, like someone waking from a nightmare and finally stepping into peace. The following days were all about rebuilding. Miranda was officially removed from the hospital, reported for misconduct and evidence tampering. You never saw her again. One day, Lucas got sick again, but this time, Adrian decided to stay home. You spent the whole day together on the couch, wrapped in blankets, cartoons playing on the TV. It was simple, sweet, like a real home. At the end of the day, you sat beside him and rested your head on his shoulder. "Are you still afraid?" you asked Adrian. "Every day. But now I'm more afraid of losing you than facing anything out there." He looked at you seriously, and after a brief silence, he went on. "I want to propose something. Not marriage. Not yet. But a pact. A home together. A new beginning. With roots. Will you say yes?" You didn't hesitate. "Yes. But only if it's on my terms too. With laughter over breakfast, fights solved with hugs, lazy Sundays, and truths spoken without fear." Deal. The weeks passed gently, as if time itself understood that you needed rest. The house slowly took on a new shape. Routines created with love. Closets that now held your clothes, drawings taped to the fridge, the smell of coffee and cake drifting from the kitchen. Adrian stepped down from the board, but returned to operating full-time. He realized saving lives was what truly drove him, and that power didn't have to come from a title, but from how he used his hands, his time, and his heart. You picked up a few small projects again, started studying something new. You cared for Lucas as if he were your own son. On a spring morning, the house felt quieter than usual. But it wasn't the cold silence from before. It was a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that settles in when everything inside you calms down. For the first time in a long time, the chaos of the outside world didn't seem more important than the smell of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen, the sound of Lucas's little footsteps in the hallway, and the soft weight of an arm draped around your waist. You woke up with Adrian still sleeping, his face relaxed. No tension in his jaw, no crease between his brows. He looked at peace, like he'd finally found something he hadn't even known he was searching for. You got up slowly and went downstairs to make breakfast. While setting the table, you heard Lucas running down the stairs and jumping into your arms. "I dreamed you were wearing a wedding dress," he said, excited. "Daddy was crying, and I was carrying the rings." You laughed. "And do you think you'd make a good ring bearer?" "I'd be the best ever, I promise." Adrian appeared moments later, coming down the stairs in a t-shirt, his hair messy, wearing a smile you still couldn't believe was yours. "What did I miss?" "An imaginary wedding," you replied, smiling. He came closer, wrapped his arms around you from behind, and kissed your shoulder. Maybe not so imaginary. The days that followed were filled with simple plans and deep smiles. The house was full of little changes, but the most beautiful thing was what you were building on the inside. Lucas started calling you Mom without effort. Adrian, now with fewer hours at the hospital, was more present than ever. You went to the park together, cooked together, messed up together, and that made everything feel more real. The following Sunday, during a simple lunch in the garden, Lucas came running over with his hands full of flowers he'd yanked from the flower bed. "These are for you, because now we're a family, just like in the stories." You took the flowers and replied, "No, sweetheart, we're better than the stories, because this is real." And that afternoon, surrounded by crooked flowers, silent promises, and hands held tight, you knew the happy ending wasn't a finish line. It was a place you build, with love, day after day. If you made it this far, it means you felt every scene, every breath, every silence. Thank you for living this story with us. Now tell me in the comments, what story would you like to live in the next video?